Well, hi everyone, and this is Rusty again, and today's video is another one suggested by a hiker, by Mike. He suggested I do something about what I'll paraphrase and say, the unwritten rules of hiking, at least on the Appalachian Trail. When he first suggested this, I thought, well, this is going to take me just a few seconds. I'll talk about not shaking hands, fist bumping, and the hiker going uphill has the right of way. You don't want to break their momentum, and done. Well, of course, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I just had more and more to talk about. And really, the rules come in two basic categories. One, respect for others, and the other is respect for the environment. What we'll be talking about today is first shelter etiquette, then the etiquette when you're meeting others, helping other hikers, respect for the environment, and trail magic. First, shelter etiquette. Shelters, they're out there for all the hikers to use at need, and what will happen is if you arrive late at a shelter, don't just burst in. That's why I think I need to get a red filter on a red light, because people are trying to sleep. Just common courtesy, if you are at a shelter late and there's room for you, then by all means be extremely careful, extremely quiet. Same thing with leaving early, though I try my best to be quiet if I'm leaving and there's other hikers still sleeping, but the fact is we all have different schedules, and I think other hikers do have to recognize that if you want to hit the trail early, that's legitimate. What I'll typically do is, at least if it's not raining out, I'll try getting my equipment out and away from the shelter a little bit, maybe onto a picnic table or something like that as I pack up. Also, if I'm in a shelter, I'll do a lot of my packing up the night before. Hiker midnight is basically when it gets dark. I was in a shelter with Craig. We were up in Maine. There were about 4 or 5 hikers there, and there were 3 younger through hikers who just stood kind of leaning at the front of the shelter, and they just talked and talked through the dark hours. I don't think they were intentionally being rude, and that's actually fairly rare that you find somebody who's intentionally rude, but really have to respect that. Lights out, the lights are out, the sun has gone down, that means lights out on the trail. Keep that in mind. Music and other noise. I was at a campsite, and I think it was in Pennsylvania. There was a shelter there, and there were a bunch of buddies, 50-something guys. They had music blaring. They were not taking the shelter, but they were at the shelter site, so if you were in the shelter, you would have heard them. They had tents, folding chairs, and all that sort of stuff. They were not bad people. They really weren't. I went up there to hang something on a bear pole. They were very friendly. They were nice guys. I think they just were unaware of how important it is for the other hikers that they're able to get sleep. Now, I actually pitched a tent a little ways away from them, and they did quiet down a little after dark, but it was going for a while. So sometimes you run into people, and it was kind of hard. I didn't know how to address it with them. So I ended up not, because I wasn't actually staying in the shelter. But a lot of times, people who violate the rules aren't necessarily doing it intentionally. To them, this wasn't a big deal. So I don't know what to do about it other than to call one of them aside and give them a polite word. Hey, these other guys are trying to sleep. Rainy days, there's always room at the shelter. You get as many people into the shelter as you can. I show this picture of the Goddard shelter on the side of Mount Glastonbury in Vermont. We had 14 people in there because it was raining so hard. People just needed to get out of the rain. So always make room for a newcomer in a shelter if you can. Cooking in a shelter, it really depends on the shelter design. Some shelters are actually designed to have a little area out front where you can cook, but I see a lot of burn rings inside shelters, and we hear quite often about shelters burning down. You've got to be really careful, especially with fuel. I have solid fuel, which is actually safer as far as it's not going to spill and go all over the place and set a shelter on fire. But just a thing to be aware of. The picnic tables are there for a reason. A lot of times they will have a metal sheet somewhere on them, which is where you're supposed to put your stove. So let's avoid cooking inside the shelters, at least inside the ones that aren't designed for that, as much as possible. Tent in a shelter, just inexcusable. I'm sorry. I mean, there was one time I think I saw somebody had a tent in a shelter, and she was the only one there. Okay, if it's a buggy night, I can see if you're certain nobody else is going to show up, I guess you can set up your freestanding tent in a shelter. But not knowing who's going to show up at the shelter, it's kind of a rude thing to do, because it does take up a lot of space. Meeting others. Well, these are some of the quick ones. Right away, the person headed uphill has the right of way. You don't want them to have to break their stride. If they stop and say, come on down, like sometimes if you're coming down a tough climb and you're just stuck in a spot, you got to use common sense. While generally the uphill hiker has the right of way, if you're in the middle of a rock face and they're at a landing spot, well, they'll usually, or they should let you go. So, all these rules got to be taken with a grain of salt. Fist bumping. I'm not even talking about cooties in this case. The reason you fist bump as opposed, if you make any physical contact, as opposed to shaking hands, is just things like noroviruses and beaver fever, all these things. Let's face it, you've been out there, you haven't been washing your hands diligently, I'm sure. It is out in nature, yeah, you do get pretty nasty. So we don't put somebody in the spot of having to refuse to shake your hand. You just offer your fist and everybody understands why we're all doing it. Social distancing, that's a term that come up, and this is when we're talking about the coronavirus. I just don't want to get into arguments with other hikers. They generally respect if they see you're keeping your distance, they will understand that and keep away. Complaining, don't be a Debbie Downer out on the trail. It's tough enough for people who've been out there for a while. I know I was out there for 40 days on one hike, and day after day, it does start to get you down on occasion. And somebody with a bad attitude just can kind of spoil it for you. But the condescending attitude, which you will occasionally get, there is an occasional jerk out there. I mean, that's just a fact of life. Look at this picture. If you were to guess which one of these two guys was more of a through hiker, you probably would guess the guy in the white. That's Craig, my son. Well, he was just a weekend warrior like myself at the time that this picture was taken. On that trip, I distinctly remember we were coming up a hill and a guy was coming down, and this guy was clearly a through hiker, and we said hello to him, and it was like we didn't even exist. He looked down, he saw Craig coming up and thought, there's the guy I want to talk to. He's like, you people get out of my way, you're just weekend warriors. Thought Craig was a through hiker and started asking him about things, and like Craig, like, I don't know, I just hopped in the car with my father and we drove to the trailhead. Everybody is out there trying to enjoy nature, and if they are following the unwritten rules, having respect for other hikers and respect for the environment, let's not do that when you're out there. I encourage everybody, when I see them, like, oh great, you're doing 30 miles, that's fantastic. You're doing a 10-mile day hike, you're doing a 5-mile day hike, well, it's great that you're out here in the natural environment and enjoying yourself. And that is the attitude we have to have. Nobody is better than anybody else. And I've told the stories on other videos about the guys I ran into up in Maine. They thought that if you weren't northbound through hiking, you weren't worth anything, like you shouldn't even be out. You had no right to be on the trail. So a weekend hiker or a 1-week section hiker, as far as he was concerned, had no right to be out there. And when I mentioned that maybe somebody couldn't schedule to go north to south, they had to start later in the year, well, they should quit their job because this is the only right way to do it. People like that, they're the ones who shouldn't be out on the trail. So helping others, well, if you have extra stuff and you come across a hiker box, now a hiker box is something that is at a hostel normally. It's not like it's in the middle of the wood, there's a hiker box. Don't leave things at shelters, things that you don't want. That is actually the opposite of being respectful of the other hikers, because somebody else, whether it's a ridge runner or one of the trail maintainers, they're just gonna have to carry your stuff out. Somebody might wanna use this plastic water bottle. No, carry it out. Having electrolytes, a quick story. Craig was sick up in Maine, got a little overheated. Another hiker gave him some electrolytes to help replenish him. And interestingly, I returned to that exact same shelter a few months later, and there was a through hiker there who had overheated. So it doesn't just happen to people who go out for a week here or there. Through hiker, he had a bad day, he was getting a migraine. I was able to pay it forward, and I gave him the bottle of electrolytes. Supplies, especially fuel. If you have extra, usually I bring more, a little bit more than I'll end up needing, and the Esbit solid fuel tablets I carry are very tough to come by. I was up in Maine, again, there was a hiker there who needed 2 more tablets to get him through to his next stop, and I was more than happy to give it to him. It was my last night on the trail, so I knew exactly how many that I had. If somebody's water filter or water purification supply has died out, technically a water filter is a consumable because it's only good for 10,000 gallons, but help somebody out, filter some water for them. And then finally, whenever you have information that they ask for, and there's going to be one exception to that I'm going to be coming to. Be free with the information, help people out by giving the information if they want it. Respect for the environment. Littering and despoiling nature. Like this picture I found in Maryland, took a picture of it, somebody drew, I guess that's a rocket ship or something, about to take off on a tree. Not necessary. No carving in trees, no putting your initials in, no painting rocket ships on the sides of trees. Campfires and fire rings. If you're going to build a campfire, I'm not a big campfire builder, but occasionally I have.
If you do build a fire, keep it in a fire ring if there is one, and only build it for a purpose, not just because it seems like a thing to do.
This gentleman here, I think he was out with his grandson. He seemed to be old school, and I was a little annoyed at first. I wasn't sure he was with the program there. He had to build the fire. Well, it turned out he did cook over it. And when he discovered somebody had thrown a plate of spaghetti in the stream, he went down there and he did everything he could to get that stuff out. No, I misjudged. The water supplies are very important to the hikers, and doing something like that is just inexcusable. I wish blisters on whoever did it or something like that. Stealth sites. If you're going to do stealth camping, if you at all can, at the very least, use an established stealth site. That's typically what I look for. I think only once or twice that I have to pitch a tent in what was a less established stealth site. We want to minimize impact to the environment. There is the carry in, carry out, leave no trace principles that I won't go over here. That could be in and of itself a whole video, and there are plenty of them out on the internet. Walking off the trail, especially when you get above tree line in those alpine sections. Here's a picture of a very delicate ecosystem. You're really encouraged, well actually you're pretty much forbidden to go walking over some of this delicate plant life. Stay on the hard surfaces, stay on the trail. You have boots for a reason. If there's something just a little too deep, like a big mud puddle that you don't trust at depth, test it with your hiking pole. And if you can get through it without stepping off trails, please do that. And then finally, something that bears do in the woods, and you know what I'm talking about. Can't always get to a privy, and I understand that when you're out in nature and sometimes nature calls. But when you do, cat hole, have a special baggie, well marked so it doesn't get mixed up with anything else, but a special Ziploc bag that you can put the paper in. And I'm not saying carry it all the way. When you get to the next campsite that does have a privy, well, you can throw the toilet paper in the privy. And speaking of that, only toilet paper in the privy. The new moldering privies, one side is composting while the other side is getting new material for composting. And then when the guy has to pull the composted out, he's got to dig through this material and get all of the candy wrappers and crap like that that shouldn't be in there. So please carry in, carry out. Toilet paper's okay. Don't leave it in the woods. If you can't get to the next shelter where there's a privy, well then fine, bring it with you. It's not that big of a deal, and you'll have the opportunity to throw it out because the toilet paper is, I guess, compostable or whatever, and it's acceptable to put in the privy. I need to break in here from 2026 and add another rule. That's don't cut the switchbacks. Switchbacks are those portions of the trail that zigzag up and down steep slopes. Cutting them means going off trail, usually down a steep slope to pick up the trail below in the name of efficiency or speed. I see a lot of places where hikers have cut through. Trail developers and maintainers go through a lot of trouble to make switchbacks. Cutting through them not only upsets the delicate off-trail environment, causing erosion and trampling of habitats, makes your hike harder. Switchbacks are your friends. In some areas, the rules are written, and getting caught cutting switchbacks can result in fines or other punishment. Trail magic. Don't overdo it. Remember, there's probably a lot of other hikers out there. Don't take more than you need. And if you need a whole lot, well, just temper it a little bit. But don't underdo it either. This gentleman here, if you have an Instagram account, look him up, Snoopy on the Trail. He was at the Penmar State Park when I came by, and I had already eaten, and he kept on saying, hey, you want something? You need something? And I was almost insulting him by saying, no, thanks, I'm fine. But I finally realized that people who do Trail Angel stuff, they want to see you take advantage of it. That's why they're there. They're not going to think lower of you because you accepted a handout. That's why they're there. And I realized, hey, I was not treating this guy right. And I went over and he gave me a bunch of Propel mixes and some other things. I'm glad I did it because it showed respect for him and respect for what he was trying to do. This next gentleman, this was up in Maine. Just an example of you don't just grab stuff and run. I stopped and talked to him. That is how you show your appreciation. You could offer payment. I have yet to run into or see a trail angel who would accept that. Another rule, don't ruin the joy. You tell say, hey, there's trail magic coming up. You know, that kind of ruins the fun of finding it. Also, if it turns out that it was taken away, it was finished up, somebody may be looking forward to it and finding out that it's not there anymore. There is an exception. All these rules, you got to use common sense. I had a real long hiking day. The longest I've ever hiked in a single day was like 24 miles. And I was at mile 23 and a half coming to a campground, a camping area, I should call it. And there just wasn't a flat spot in there that didn't already have a tent on it. And some guy said, hey, you know, if you don't mind going another half of a mile, there's some trail magic at the trailhead there. And then he told me, then there was a lodge that I could also go to. So that clinched it for me. So in that case, I think he had to judge. Yeah, it's getting dark. This guy just said he's come 24 miles. To let me know that it was okay to go on, telling me that there was some trail magic up ahead actually did make sense. So those are the unwritten rules. I'm sure there's a lot of others that people have, and maybe some people disagree. If you disagree or you think I missed one, an important one, well, put it in the comments. If you appreciate this content, please like, share, subscribe, and comment on this or other topics you'd like me to cover. And if you haven't seen this video, please take a look at it now. Thanks for watching.